All right, what is up, you guys? In today's video, we're going to go over NFTs, what they are exactly, not in terms of like defining what non-fungible means, but just the mechanics of NFTs going from the image all the way into the marketplace. So if you're making your own NFT, you can understand the process of what exactly makes the NFT unique. So I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can. I'm going to try to break it down as simple as possible. So I might miss some technical things. I'm not going to explain the different types of NFTs or different types of tokens like ERC 721, ERC 1155, and so on. This is like an overarching framework of what an NFT is. So we're going to start with your NFT. What you typically see an image, right? But it doesn't have to be an image. So we're going to put an NFT content for now. And it doesn't have to be an image, but it can be. It can also be music. It can be a video. It could be a document. And the document could be certificate, if I can spell, identifier, ID, right? And then it can be whatever else. So that's going to be your NFT content. So once you have your NFT content, you're going to have an ID for your content. You're going to have something that identifies or indexes your content. So content ID. And that's going to look something like some like QM, just a bunch of random numbers, right? Letters. So it's going to give you a hash. That's going to be your content ID. Your content ID is going to point you to your NFT content, right? So this hash should point you to your NFT content. So your NFT content is identified with this unique hash or this identifier. It could be any assortment of letters and numbers. And this is stored inside what we call your metadata. So you're going to have metadata that stores this content. So the metadata could have information about NFT. And it could be like token ID. It could be the title of the piece. It could be a description. And then it has a link to your content ID. So that's typically what it's going to have. So your metadata will point to your content ID. Now it gets a little bit tricky because now your NFT content has its own ID, which is stored in your metadata. Your metadata is now going to have a metadata ID, if I can spell. And this is just going to be another type of hash that's different from your content ID. And it has some assortment of letters and numbers and so on. And this metadata ID is going to be similar to your content ID, but it's not going to be the same. So your metadata ID is going to point to the metadata, which points you to your content, which points you to your NFT. So you're going to kind of think about all these like folders, right? So your metadata ID has the metadata inside it. The metadata contains a link to the content ID. The content ID contains a hash or a link to the actual content itself. So now the metadata is also going to have a link. So I'm going to title this link to metadata ID. This is going to be the gateway into all these folders down here. So now you have a link to your metadata, and depending on what chain you're on, the contract is going to search for this link to your metadata ID, which grabs your metadata ID, your metadata, your content ID, all the way up into your NFT content itself. So now, what exactly grabs the link to your metadata ID? So this is going to be your blockchain contract. And this can be via Etherscan or FTM scan in our case. And this is going to be a public ledger where the history is tracked publicly. Not only is it a public ledger, it is also the biggest folder that contains links to all necessary information, if I can spell information. So you're going to have a blockchain contract on Etherscan or FTM scan. This blockchain contract is going to be a public ledger. The history is going to be tracked publicly, and this allows you to document like which NFT was made first, when it was made, when the contract was created, and all its history, if anything about it changed or if it moved or anything like that. So because it is a public ledger and because its history is tracked publicly, you can, and it's the whole Mona Lisa thing, like I know that this is like, this was the first one or this is the original one. It's because the blockchain has it on a public ledger where the history is tracked publicly. So this is what makes that Mona Lisa argument that everyone talks about valid, right? And the action it takes is on this blockchain contract. If you're the one that owns the contract, you get to feed that contract the metadata that has links to the metadata ID, which has a link to the metadata, which has a link to the content ID, which has your image, music, video, document, whatever. It has your NFT content in there. So the blockchain is going to call on the link to the metadata, and it just goes down the list as such. So really, like, although you're looking at just a picture, the thing that makes your NFT unique is all these, the content ID, the metadata ID, and then the contract ID, which is provided when you mint it on the blockchain. So I know this is a lot, but there's more. So where exactly does all this stuff live? So all these links, all these IDs, and the hash that comes with it, the link to the metadata ID, the metadata ID, metadata and content ID, they're all going to be hosted on a decentralized cloud storage. This could be Pinata, this could be Google Cloud Service, this could be any decentralized cloud storage service. I don't know all the ones that are out there, but and also your NFT content. Everything is hosted on a decentralized cloud storage service. Your blockchain contract is going to be hosted on whatever chain you decide to use. So hosted on respective chain, Etherscan, FTM scan, etc. So you have a marketplace. What role does this marketplace play in all of this? So examples of marketplaces: OpenSea, we have Paint, Swap. On Fantom, we have NFT Key on Fantom, Tofu, NFT. These are all on Fantom. So these would be just some marketplaces, and they have their own website. The website will pull the contract from the blockchain, which has a link to your metadata, metadata ID, metadata, content ID, all the way up into your content. It pulls the content and places it on the marketplace. And that's how marketplaces display your NFT or a NFT. So now, where does your involvement come in, right? If you're a seller, you submit a contract if you want to sell something on the marketplace, right? You already have everything hosted on a decentralized cloud storage service. Your content ID, you've already done all this, right? You have your blockchain contract, which you've minted and attached a link to your metadata ID. You've posted on the marketplace, submitted it, right? You're submitting your collection from down here into the marketplace for other people to see, right? Other people are going to go on the marketplace and see the exact same thing. The marketplace is going to pull from the contract a link to the metadata ID. The metadata ID is going to have a link to your metadata, which has information about the NFT, and also a link to your content ID, right? Your content ID is going to have a link to your content. So that content hosted on a decentralized cloud storage service is going to be pulled all the way to the marketplace, where you as a buyer, or even you as a seller, or you just looking on the marketplace, will be able to see. In a very simplified term, that's kind of how it's broken down. When you're looking at what exactly is an NFT when it comes to making it, selling it, buying it, like how does it work on the marketplace? This is kind of what it looks like. So what exactly makes this non-fungible, right? There's all these IDs, your NFT content and the marketplace and your interactions with the marketplace and you viewing it. What makes all of this unique? What makes this non-fungible, right? If you go to the blockchain, you get your own contract ID or your own contract hash, right? You have your metadata ID, you have a link to your metadata ID, your content ID, your NFT content. Everything in this box right here, they all use unique identifiers. So everything here uses a unique identifier. Your contract on the blockchain has a unique identifier. Your metadata ID is a unique identifier. Your content ID, also a unique identifier, which leads you to your image. So this image, in order to get to this image, you have to go through all these unique identifiers. And if you want to make another image, if you want to put another piece of content out there, it will not have the same IDs. It will not have the same identifiers. Even if you mint another image to the same contract, it will not have the same metadata, right? It will not have the same content ID. And that's what makes NFTs unique, right? Because of its unique identifiers. And this is how you can track on the blockchain via the public ledger, where the history is tracked publicly, which one was minted first, what happened to it, its history, was it bought, did it move wallets? You can track all that history on the blockchain, and that's where you can see all the history of these unique identifiers. And that's essentially what makes NFTs unique, right? That's what makes NFTs non-fungible. So this is kind of like the entire outline. Your interaction as a buyer or seller, you're searching or submitting to a marketplace, and it could be any one of these. That marketplace is searching the blockchain for a contract that is either submitted or you're submitting, and it's hosted on Etherscan, FTMscan, whatever chain, whatever your respective chain is. That contract will have a link to your metadata ID, which will have a link to your metadata, which will have a link to your content ID, and your content ID will contain your NFT content. I know it's a lot, but this is the big picture of what exactly is an NFT, coming from you as a buyer or seller, or just someone looking at NFTs, all the way to the actual content itself. So from the user end, starting from the marketplace will display the NFT content or the metadata, but how it gets that information is by querying the blockchain via the contract that was submitted or searched. So the contract on the blockchain is going to have a link or a token URI that is a link to the metadata, where the metadata ID is right here. And you'll see that it's the exact same as the metadata down here. So this is just a link of this metadata ID that's fed into your contract via the token URI. So inside the metadata has a link to the content ID. So here's the link for the content ID, and then here's the content ID. You'll see that the content IDs match, but inside the metadata is just a link. And that's going to direct you to your NFT content, which in this case is an image, and it's listed on the marketplace. So now if you're making an NFT, you're going to start with some NFT content. In this case, it's an image. You're going to upload it to a decentralized cloud storage service where it's going to provide a content ID right here and a link to that content ID, which you'll see here. You're going to put that link to the NFT content ID inside the metadata and upload the metadata file to the storage, where it's going to provide a metadata ID, as you'll see right here, and also a link to that metadata ID. So you'll see for every link, the IDs always match. And in the link, all it is just a literal link that leads you to the whatever ID it is. So the link to the metadata ID is going to be submitted to the contract via the token URI function on your contract, and direct any marketplace that searches that contract to your NFT content right here. So this is just going to be an example of what it looks like if you're submitting or searching a contract all the way to the content, or if you're making the content and trying to put it on a marketplace to be searched or submitted. Well, that is it for explaining what exactly an NFT is. This is more in the framework of if you're trying to make your own NFT, which I will make videos of in the future using this exact framework. If you guys like the content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.